Welcome to Are We Happy Yet?
I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
I'm Jane Thatcher Hahn, licensed clinical social worker. We're not just friends, we're therapists who have been working with our clients on improving their mental health and relationships for years. Coupled with our own life experiences, we found ourselves in a conundrum. As mental health becomes less stigmatized and conversations about healing, self-help, and personal growth have gone mainstream, why are more and more Americans reporting lower life satisfaction and increased mental health issues with each passing year?
The question kept nagging at us. Despite the growing openness around mental health, why are we seeing an increase in anxiety, depression, and isolation?
It's baffling, right? We're all diving into therapy, self-help, psychedelics, meditation, life hacks, you name it. But the sense of connection and well-being seems to be slipping away, no matter what we do.
So Jane and I got curious about the bigger picture, how creativity, politics, technology, work, spirituality, culture, and more impact our well-being. Our goal is to spark open, relatable conversations about these topics. Through unfiltered discussions, a few uncomfortable truths, we'll have lots of laughter and lightheartedness along the way. Join us each week as we dig deep into these questions, share insights, and try to understand what will truly, finally, make us happy.
Let's go.
Here on Are We Happy Yet? We're constantly exploring things that can help people and barriers to people feeling a fulfilled and content life. And one thing, Jane, you and I always talk about are what makes therapy effective and what are things that can make mental health care more effective for folks. And so before we jump into today's episode with Betsy Fowler, who I'll share more about in a moment, you and I just wanted to get on and talk a little bit more about our experiences working with folks using non-traditional ways of psychotherapy. So you and I both do talk therapy.
Yep.
But you and I also both do other modalities as well. We're both trained in EMDR. I don't use it as much as you do. I do a lot of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. I know you're trained in animal assisted psychotherapy. So really incorporating a lot of different things other than talking into therapy. So just wanting to spend a few moments talking about that before we introduce Betsy.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's an interesting talk therapy is a pretty broad topic, actually, right? A lot of different things fall under the category of talk therapy. And I think it's important for everybody to kind of understand all these different delineations, because when you're going to seek therapy or trying to understand it, you might hear talk therapy, psychedelic therapy, EMDR. You might hear things like evidence-based practices. And I think that if you're not feeling good and you just need help, those things are kind of overwhelming and not maybe useful in the moment. So
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to kind of talk through some of that stuff.
Yeah, and one thing, and we're going to do a deeper episode on this soon about different types of therapy and what to look for and how to know if it's a good fit. But I think one thing that you and I align on, and we talk about it in Betsy's episode today, is how whatever modality, right? Talk therapy, psychedelics, EMDR, who knows? But how experiences and corrective experiences and helping people have different experiences seems to be a big change maker.
Definitely.
So what are your thoughts on that, and how has that shown up for you? And just talking a little bit about how EMDR and the work that you do can help people have a different experience outside of their habitual mind, habitual thinking, habitual baseline feeling.
Yeah, I think when you say having different experiences, what comes to mind for me is not only having a different intellectual experience or interpretation of the world, but having a different whole body experience or a different experience on a whole system level. And I think that that's where talk therapy can fall short sometimes. And I think you and I, over the course of our careers, have seen that and have tried to figure out what do we do then? What you're talking about is having a different experience on multiple levels. And I think that's really important. And sometimes when we over intellectualize, I mean, a lot of times clients come to me and they can tell you exactly what is going on with them. I'm anxious because of this. My parents treated me this way. This particular trauma has made me behave this way. I'm not going to tell them something new about why they are the way they are, their mental health. Granted, sometimes people come to me and they have literally no idea why they feel the way
Right.
they do or how they got to where they are. And that's really good work too, right? Sometimes you just need a neutral person to make connections for you and to help you unravel and
Mm-hmm.
understand your history, your family, your experiences. But there's also a lot of people who have already talked their experience, into the
Yeah.
ground, and they can tell me more about themselves, and they can therapize themselves, and they feel really stuck. So I talk with my clients a lot about the word stuck,
Mm-hmm.
because I think when you're first starting therapy, there's this great time of getting to know each other, building trust, building rapport. Even being in relationship with your therapist provides a
Mm-hmm.
really restorative experience for a lot of
Yeah.
people. You're having it's a different template for how you can relate to somebody. And then a lot of times my clients like, and I'm at the wall. I know this. We're talking around it. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
around in circles. And then I say to them, all right, we need a back door. We need another way to get in
Mm-hmm.
there. You're talking about what's conscious, what you can name, but it's not shifting what you're experiencing on a day-to-day level in your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
It's not affecting how your brain is wired necessarily. It's
Mm-hmm.
not affecting how, and to be fair, talk therapy does rewire your brain, but sometimes you
Yeah.
need it an even deeper or further experience of that.
And you need a good therapist, right? I think like, and I'm
Yes.
not gonna shit on therapists here, but like a good therapist is providing an experience. A good therapist is
Yes.
not just talking through problems. And I think that's a huge piece of it too. And that's something that Betsy goes into in today's episode that I really like is we have so many experiences that are in our unconscious that
Mm.
happen to us in childhood. Like we know trauma keeps the score and the body keeps the score. Sorry, trauma keeps the score,
I
body
mean,
keeps
it's
the
all
score.
keeping score at this point.
It is. But how much of this is held in our body and nervous system and
Yeah,
unconscious, and how, like, through the work that Betsy talks about, somatic therapy, psychedelic therapy, just somatic healing, is getting past the mind and the intellectualizing and what we know and just feeling things without a story, right? And how
absolutely.
counter that is to just our way of being, I think, as humans. Like we want to know, right?
We want to know, we want to feel like we're in control of the healing process. We
Mm-hmm.
want to feel like we can like nail therapy and do it right,
Yeah.
and know how long it's going to take and how
Yeah.
much pain we're actually going to feel, right? So what you're
Yeah.
talking about, and I say this to my clinicians, I say it to my clients, over intellectualization is actually its own form, it's its own defense, right? Like putting
Yeah.
everything in your head and being super intellectual about everything is something that we frequently name in our clients as just a way to be
Mm-hmm.
well defended and not actually have to feel things.
I think you're so right. And I mean, even before we have hopped on here, my mom called me and she's like, I am so anxious. Why? I was feeling so good. Why?
Mm,
Why do you think? And I mean, I get pulled into that too. Like, we want to know why we feel the way that we do. And I
mm,
think to some extent, like, we should have the awareness. But I also think there's like so much shit that is we're not aware of that are in our unconscious, that's environmental, that like we just can't have awareness of,
yeah.
that impacts us and our mood. And so I think for me, a lot of the work that I try to do with clients is, yes, let's build some awareness and insight into triggers and patterns. But at the end of the day, like the why doesn't really matter,
Mm,
right? What matters is how do we deal with this? What's coming up? Is there information here, right? Because I find a lot of clients getting stuck on the
yeah.
why. And I think it goes to what you're saying. It's like intellectualizing is a defense. If we
Hmm.
know, then perhaps we're safe, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the why only matters if it leads you to some sort of solution or intervention, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's really interesting that like there's an extra layer of discomfort that's coming from
Mm-hmm.
from saying I have to know why this is happening, or I have to know why that I'm feeling
Yeah.
this. And I read a study recently, and we can link it in the notes. A researcher slash writer tried all the different mood tracking apps to see if it made her happier. And some of the research around that shows that if you're tracking your mood or your happiness or your mental health, really consistently, that it doesn't actually improve your mental health. Right.
Right.
So just because I know that I'm anxious right now in this moment doesn't necessarily give me a tool to fix that. If I'm constantly tracking how I feel, that doesn't mean I've
Yeah.
implemented something. So I think when
Right.
my clients go, I'm stuck, then I say, all right, how else do we get into the system? Because your mental health,
Yeah.
your mood, your well-being is very, very complex, and it's tied to lots and lots of systems. It's tied to your physical system. It's tied to your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
It's tied to your emotional system. For some people, they believe it's tied to their spiritual system. So I want to get around the words and the conscious part of your brain into the stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you can't touch by talking it over and over and over.
And that's where
Mm-hmm,
EMDR is helpful
mm-hmm,
and psychedelic assisted therapy is helpful. Yeah, 100%.
mm-hmm. And I think, mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
I think to add to that list, you've got EMDR, psychedelic assisted therapy, you've got somatic experiencing, you've got animal assisted therapy, you've got art therapy, you've got music therapy, you've got narrative
Mm-hmm.
therapy or writing,
Mm-hmm.
creativity. A lot of people are using their breath work and yoga. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
pieces that you can bring in, can and should. And I've said this 1,000 times to my clients, and I've said it on the podcast. You have to throw everything at it, right? You
Yeah.
can't say, I'm going to entrust my mental health to one professional and hope that they take care of all of
Right.
it. I would also like to do that, but I don't get to, because that's not really how it works, right? There's so many things that lead you to
Yeah.
healing and well-being.
And this word is overdone, but I think that's why a holistic approach is so
Mm-hmm.
important. And I think that's even why, I mean, perhaps some of the original conversations around starting this podcast are like, okay, we sit with this client, they're anxious, right?
Yeah.
Like, da 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 da. But like, what is going on in their environment? What are their hormones
Mm-hmm.
like? What like is their sleep like?
Mm-hmm.
What are they getting? Are they moving their body, right?
Yep.
Like they're it's kind of a microcosm to what we started this podcast is like there's so much more going on than just what meets the eye. Like
Right.
we are complex people and humans have these complex needs and so does culture and
Mm-hmm.
society at large. And so how do we start to shine a light on more things other than just like zeroing in on one
Yeah.
thing?
And I think if you take the Western um, model of healing, health, well-being, like the Western, and 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 I don't want to clump too many things together, but maybe like the Western insurance model, I think, which
Mm-hmm.
drives a lot of how we treat people.
Mm-hmm.
So then this model, if you're trying to use insurance, get your health care covered, the idea is you have an ailment that I can diagnose. If I can't diagnose it,
Yeah.
can't get covered, can't get paid. So you have
Yeah.
something that we can diagnose, and then we can treat in as few sessions or as few visits as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can be on your way, or you can take a medication.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's uh, we've really been stripped in some ways
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the concepts of healing and well-being, to this really narrow view of health, and they've tried
100%.
to pigeonhole, put therapy in there. It's really hard for therapists to work with insurance, partly because we don't really fit into that model. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing process that takes a lot of patient client
Right.
investment and participation. What was the other piece I was thinking about with that? Oh, the word holistic, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right, and that's unfortunate when these kind of important words are over.
Do you think it's overdone?
I do. I think it's being used a lot in all sorts of ways, some useful and some not. Um, but the concept is like, I'm going to see you as a whole person with a complex life that's layered on by many factors. You were
Mm-hmm.
mentioning hormones, diet, exercise. I've had
Mm-hmm.
clients whose lives were transformed just by figuring out a hormone issue or a
Yeah.
thyroid issue.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not going to be everybody either. You may figure out your hormone issue and still feel the same. There's just there's a lot of layers to how we show up and feel every day.
And that piece is why I'm so passionate about it, is what you just said. Okay, like your clients that are transformed from figuring out that they
Mm,
have a thyroid issue. If we're just taking this traditional symptom reduction approach
mm,
and this person is so depressed, so tired, no energy, we're treating them for depression every week, da 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 da, with doing talk therapy, billing 90837, making the insurance company happy. I think that has a traumatic effect on the
mm,
client in the way of there's something wrong with
mhm.
me. Why am I not getting better? Therapy doesn't work versus this holistic approach of maybe there's something else going on here, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a really one of the things that really drew me to creating this podcast as well is that there's then
Mm-hmm.
people are turning in on themselves again because why
Yeah.
can't I'm in the therapy or I'm taking the medication or I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing all of the things that I need to be doing and I still don't feel good and it's
Mm-hmm.
so disheartening for people
Mm-hmm.
um, to for the culture to say, well, if you do your work, if you take responsibility for
Yeah.
yourself and you go to therapy and you take your meds, you should be fine, which is not
Mm-hmm.
true for a lot of people,
Yeah.
which could be because you're on the wrong med and you have the wrong therapist, or also could be
Mm-hmm.
because you're not actually fully taking responsibility for yourself, or you're actually so well
Mm-hmm.
defended, you're not, you know, actually moving through the process. But it could also be
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of other factors, and because maybe there's financial stress, or maybe you're in a disenfranchised population. That maybe it's because nobody can afford to buy a home, and the middle class is
Yeah.
disappearing. There's so many reasons,
Yeah.
um, and so I want people to start being able to strike a balance between it's my fault and I'm to blame and there's something wrong with me because I don't feel good and I'm responsible for my own mental health. I don't have like the magic space where that is, but I think that's a really
Mm-hmm.
important conversation.
100%. And I think that's why we're here doing what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Well, without further ado, we'll introduce today's guest, Betsy Fowler. Betsy is a registered nurse and psychedelic guide. I met Betsy in our psychedelic therapy training program. We became colleagues and really good friends. So we are super excited about having her on the podcast here today, talking about all of these things and more. So enjoy this episode with Betsy. The work we're talking about is somatic therapy, somatic work.
Mm-hmm.
For someone who's never heard the word somatic, what does somatic therapy mean? What is the work? What's your definition?
Yeah. So somatic therapy is very body based. So instead of being in the mind, we're actually going into the body and we're feeling the sensations in the body. And I like to also say we're developing this language with the body. That can be really new to people if you've never done it before and feel kind of like awkward or strange when you're just tuning into like, oh, I'm having a tingling in my right hand or like cold or numbness there. I would normally not even think about that. But we're using like really intentionally putting awareness onto these sensations of your body. And we're allowing the body to process in the way that it needs to, tuning into the innate wisdom of the body. And yeah, just really dropping out of the mind and the story and allowing this like to me when I first like learned about this work too, I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much wisdom down here that I've been ignoring. That a lot of us in our culture too live like very cognitive based, like brain based. It's all about the brain, where you're like, but the brain is connected to the rest of the body and there's like so much more. And it's like this deeper wisdom that lives here too. Yeah.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking of, how many times in Western medicine are we encouraged to drop into our own wisdom versus how many times are we encouraged to hand over our healthcare, our wellness, our well-being, our mental health to somebody else, a professional, right? So I think can be like it's a very different paradigm to say, I have a lot of what I need to heal within me. And problematically, it can't make anybody else money, right?
Yeah.
So it can't make big conglomerates money, and it can't make big drug companies money. You know, if you kind of take back that sense of, I know how to heal, and that wisdom's already lives with me, and I just need somebody to help me tap into that and trust that and honor that. That's a big paradigm shift, I think, culturally. And one of the things that we were talking about before is kind of this overarching theme or story that we develop as children around, you know, as Hannah was saying, the thing that leads to the blame, the shame, the anxiety, the depression. And you've got all these great tools that you found to help address that. Can you talk a little bit more about the story that we are developing, that we've developed about ourselves and our responsibility and all of those pieces?
Yeah. So this just like hit home really hard when one of my teachers had said it this way, that a lot as children, when we live, so much is out of our control. We're like depending on our caregivers for everything. So a way as children to take control is to blame ourselves for everything. So we internalize like, oh, my parents are getting divorced because of me. It was my fault. I wasn't a good enough kid. Or, I'm not lovable enough. I'm not good. I'm bad. And we learn to do that, which as children can be intelligent because you're getting some type of sense of control in situations that feel out of control. But then we continue that narrative and that belief and that perspective as adults. And we don't even realize we're still blaming ourselves for everything that's going wrong. When so much of what's happening is like the environments that we're in, the cultures that we're in. And we're just always still coming back to, this was my fault because I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable. A lot of shame like towards ourselves that we're still not even like we're unconsciously doing it.
What are some of the unconscious ways you see folks doing that? Like I could think, you know, of some of people I know or clients that I work with that are very adamant and that's self-talk that they have is, I'm not good enough. But I think there are so many other sneaky ways that pattern can show up unconsciously. What are some sneaky ways that you see it sneak up?
And sneaky is the best word. I use that all the time. Our clients also like shame is sneaky and not feeling good enough is sneaky. All of those things. They're finding their little workarounds. You know?
And I love sneaky because I feel like that means unconsciously. We're not aware that it's happening. I mean, I think big themes are that I'm not good enough. I'm bad. And say if it's even like something happened at work and you're like, I don't know, even your boss just like giving you some type of like critique or saying something in a certain way. And then you're automatically like, oh gosh, like I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible employee. Like I need to fix all these things about me to do better. I feel like it can affect just how you view yourself. If you have like low self-esteem or a lot of self-doubt, that's definitely what I lived with for a long time, was just a lot of self-doubt. Like I was never good enough. And it shows up in that you're like, oh, I don't even realize that I'm feeling this way about myself. Like it may have been that I started that narrative as a child, to help me like get through with my circumstances.
Well, I love that you mentioned like that was wise for that child. It's the best adaptation you have at the time. And I always say that to my clients, like this is the best thing that you could do at the time with like what was available to you. And now this is not serving you in 2024. In this time, we've got to bring the whole system and all the parts and all the stories into the present moment, right? When you don't need that narrative anymore. And I see it show up a lot with perfectionism in my clients. And they have all these rules for themselves about all the ways they need to be and show up in the world. And when they're hitting those, they tend to have a little bit of relief from the anxiety, but as soon as they sort of waver, which they inevitably will, because perfection is not an option for any of us. So then they waver and they get anxious or depressed or other symptoms come up.
And that's been what has been such a game changer for me in my work is, you know, the difference between having a client come in and say, for example, why can't I stick with my gym routine? Or why can't, you know, and we can make strategies and goals and da-da-da-da-da, but deep down, there's probably a wound that you're not worth taking care of. So we can do all the tangible work on the surface. But until you get into your system, your nervous system, your subconscious, it's just like putting
Band-aids. Band-aids. And, you know, our term in the mental health world is solutions focused therapy. And it's always like, can you do this in 8 sessions? Can you get this person, you know, working out and taking good care of themselves and feeling worthy in you know, however many sessions? And we're like, no, this is a lifetime journey of healing and understanding and naming your wounds and dropping down, and that, which doesn't mean you have to be in therapy or a treatment forever, as much as stepping on the journey and being willing to start, you know, with something deeper, some deeper work.
And like you said, it's scary to go there. I mean, like, it's scary to uncover the deeper work and like the deeper wounds. But I also think it's the only way, really. Like, is to actually tap into that and realize all of my stuff that is coming up is, again, not because I'm broken, because I developed a certain belief about myself in childhood. So when my fiance leaves crumbs on the countertop when he eats in the middle of the night and I freak out, it's not because he's leaving the crumbs or he's disrespectful. It's because deep down there's, I'm unlovable, no one cares about me. So when he eats chips and doesn't clean it up, it hits that wound, right? But I could spend how many days calling you guys and complaining about Michael eating chips on the counter when it's really, oh, this is inside of me. I think there's a certain freedom in that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a certain freedom, and then there's a certain level of ownership you have to take. And not just blame others. And like, and that's also can be like a really intelligent mechanism as a child to help you get through. But then as your adult self, you don't want to keep blaming others for all of the things that like keep happening in your life that are bad or negative. Just taking that ownership. I think this work, along with like tuning into your own innate healing wisdom, is this sovereignty. This level of like agency, like you hold so much power within yourself. And I think our culture like takes away our power a lot too. Where that Western model can still be like, go to the doctor because they're the expert and always like listen to what they have to say and don't even think about what that means to you personally. When you yourself are the one who knows you best, and you can always like listen from other people, learn from other people, but it's really like about tuning into this level of like, I have so much self-respect, self-esteem, and power and authority within myself that no one can take away from me. And just being able to get to that level of like of self-knowing and self-love is like super beautiful and powerful.
And it's making me think of like self-trust, right? And like, if you're never in your experience, and I mean, I'm even thinking about like childhood, and I wasn't raised religious, but like, doesn't religion teach us that like we're inherently flawed unless we like go to God for all our wisdom? Like, how much that...
As somebody that was raised very religious, I can affirm. That is the story. That is the story.
Right. And then like be compliant and sit in the chair for 8 hours a day. And if you don't, you're a bad kid. You know, how much of, I really think the traditional culture strips us of our self-trust.
Totally.
Which in your, like, the translation in my head, Betsy, is when you're saying power, right? Like, we're these powerful beings that unfortunately get conditioned where power is stripped from us, and the power goes to everything outside of us.
Yeah, totally.
And then we're looking for power in these strange ways. Because
Yeah.
as we're talking, I'm just thinking of the way we show up on social media and
Yeah.
people screaming at each other and people blaming each other and people calling each other out from behind these screens. And I'm just thinking that's just sort of a symptom of a disempowered person not taking responsibility for themselves, which is hard, and blaming other people, and ultimately being afraid, you know, showing up in a really fearful space as opposed to an empowered, grounded space where I don't need to take anything from you, or I don't need to cut you down, or I don't need to hurt you because I've got what I need in here. And I think, you know, power is a loaded word, and maybe we need multiple words for that. You know, there's an empowered space you can come from where you know yourself, you believe in yourself, and you know that everybody else deserves as well. And then there's a whole other kind of power that we're seeing a lot culturally of only my group, or only us, or I need power over other people, or my power brings me more money and influence than other people, and so we're at odds. And you're talking about something to me that sounds very different, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm in harmony, and you even talked about that earlier, that you have experienced that sort of harmony or connectedness, oneness that we feel in this work sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you found some really amazing tools and things that you are using to help people find this sort of calm, centered, empowered place, work through some of these stories we brought through from childhood. You've got the somatic work that you do. You do also some work with psychedelics and cannabis. You do work with the body. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it helps people and how it works and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So I love that it's like a very first like body based. I love like bringing nature in as like a really important element too. My experience with nature has shifted where I found this certain level of support in nature and feeling this sense of just oneness and connection. And it almost took away this feeling of loneliness too, of like, oh, I'm alone in everything I'm experiencing. No one else is going through this, so there's no support around me.
Yeah.
And I've found through nature, it's been like, oh, I'm going to sit down on the grass or like sit against a tree and feel just like, first of all, the beauty of nature and then also the support. And I feel like it's a really good way to start to even just sit in nature, sit against a tree and get into your body and just even feel yourself on the ground and like feel your body with the air, like the sensation of air moving across it or like sunshine coming across it. And it's a really supportive tool in that way. I also love using breath and coming into the body, feeling this just safety, calmness of the breath to just always bring you back in. And I work also like psychosomatic work. So I love to bring in different elements of working with your inner child, or doing parts work, just bringing in different elements to get to understand yourself better and bring in a level of self-compassion. I love the term compassionate curiosity, and I use that a lot in my work, where that's where we're coming from always. We're taking away the judgment, the shame. We're coming with this awareness of like, oh, I am innately good. And I can innately love myself. And just even like, I know getting into the body can be hard for a lot of people, because people can have like different relationships with their bodies. And for some people, they're like, oh, I don't want to like get into my body, or like they judge their bodies, or they don't really trust their bodies. And I love to, especially for people who are feeling that way, like bring that compassionate curiosity. We're taking away any shame or judgment, and you're just kind of like, I don't know, being with your essence and that like trust that can develop. And then that like that sense of we all hold this higher self, or like this capital S self that is this all knowing, like compassionate, courageous part of us that we can always come back to also.
What has your experience been, either in your own life or with clients or people that you work with, where there's a difficulty either being in the body because of trauma, because of, you know, the cultural programming around body image? What has your experience been like with that aspect?
Yeah, I've even changed a lot of my perspectives just in the past like year about my own body. And this cultural narrative that we have, that we need to be a certain size, something's wrong with you, or you're unhealthy even if you're like at a certain size. And
or shape.
Size, shape, just like that we all need to fit into this like model style body, and that's what beauty is.
And health, as you said,
and
beauty
health.
and health is a certain size, right? At a certain age, I feel like.
Totally. And I've just, from like, I don't know, hearing other people talk and just like learning a different perspective too, and just like bringing up that awareness of like how we are so focused on this very certain type of body, but in reality, like all bodies are beautiful. And like just the acceptance of your own body, and like it's just beautiful just how it is it's something that I think like we can really develop, because when we're changing our thoughts, or we're changing our narrative or our perspective, we can be like, oh, I'm actually like, it doesn't matter the shape or the size of my body, like it's my body and I appreciate it a lot. Like, and it's been really cool to do that work with people, to be like, oh, okay, I can actually appreciate my body and what it does for me, and just taking away the shame from it, and just treating your body better too when you start to appreciate your body.
And I think what you're speaking to is this through line I'm hearing of whether it's body image and the way your body looks, or it's a feeling. It's not approaching it from this fix it, gotta change it mentality, but this kind acceptance, exploratory curiosity mentality, and how that's actually the shift. Because if we hate our body, like I was giving in the example earlier, and we like hate ourselves, we're going to be going against the brick wall. But if we can actually like be in acceptance and curiosity, that you're saying like that's when change actually does happen.
Totally.
I feel like a lot of clients come and they think that healing is the linear. There's something not working. There's something broken here. There's something that needs to be fixed. I need you to take me from A to B. And once I get to B, then I can love myself, and then I can be okay, and then I can be fixed, right? So if I change a bunch of things about myself, then I can love myself. And you're talking about sort of the back door of love yourself first. Or find that acceptance first, or accept that you're never fixed nor broken. That's very like, you know, black and white thinking. A very either or, which we're very good at culturally. But it's sort of it's another shift in the perspective that you're talking about. Like, you didn't come here to get fixed. But when we go for healing, or when we go for therapy, or when we go to, you know, any doctor or nurse or hospital, there can be this concept of I want to be fixed and I want to arrive. And ultimately the healing might be changing that perspective. And thinking about it in a different way. And you brought up a great word, which was urgency. And we are an urgent people, right? Like right away and right now, and like how long will it take? And we all talked about experiencing our clients who come and say, how many sessions will this be? And how long does this take? And XYZ. And I think there's something that's really holding us back about that mindset.
And it is such an immediacy culture. I mean, I would And that is another thing I love about you is like, when I'm with you, it's like time slows down and you like don't look past me. Like it's truly like an energy I can feel coming from your soul. But I mean, I'm sure that's because you've embodied this, and it's such an interesting thing, right? In this busy world where we have these fucking cell phones that go off all the time. That it's not more urgency, it's not immediacy, it's not getting more done, it's not going faster, it's not optimization, it's slowing down. It's finding ease. And I think that's been the disconnect. And I think that's why it's feeling worse and worse out here for a lot of people, because it's not meeting that urgency with more urgency. It's meeting that urgency with a sense of inner peace, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Betsy?
I totally
okay. I was like, oh god, I gotta write some of that stuff down. Don't mean urgency with more urgency. Okay.
No, I like 100% agree. Like, our culture is very obsessed with how fast can you get something done, how productive can you be, how what's the quick fix to everything. And really, this work is like total like 180 from that. And you're like, oh, that's not actually how we heal, or that's not actually how I'm going to change something or like receive something that I'm wanting and desiring in my life. And it's much more about rest. And I feel that I'm actually really good at rest.
Oh, good.
And I that for a period of time, I was judging myself for it. And I was like, I love to take naps, or like, I love to just sit in the park.
You love to take naps.
I took one today. I only got up because somebody else came to do a podcast.
I know.
That's the only reason I got up. I love it.
It's the best. But I realized, I was like, oh, this is actually something that's natural to me that I can share with others. That's like, it's good to slow down. It's good to like not try to keep up with the rat race of this capitalistic culture. Because that's not going to help you.
So this is something I really want your take on. Like, okay, we're talking about this as countercultural, and I agree, and I live that, and I've, what do they call that? Dark soul of the night, or whatever the hell?
Dark night of the soul.
Yeah, okay. Dark night of the soul. Yes. But like, if if you really choose to live in this way, like, there's pain and grief and loneliness. But Betsy, like, what about people who crave this but are scared of how their life will change? And what I mean by their relationships will change, their friendships may change, their relationship with alcohol may change. They couldn't see how that would survive in the job that they do or the marriage that they're in. Like, what do you see with that?
I can acknowledge that it's really scary. Anytime change, that's why change is so hard. Because it's scary, it's different, you don't know the outcome that's going to happen. You already know the version of you that exists today in your life that exists today, so when change is happening, you don't know what the true outcome will be. But I will say, and it does take a certain level of, like, this work is not easy. And it does take a certain level of just desire to be like, okay, like, I've had enough living a certain way, or like a certain thought pattern, or a certain behavior, or a certain situation, where you're like, you're willing to, like, I'm okay with change happening. And also take your time. Like, healing is not linear, as we've like created this culture where everything just happens like A and B, C. Like, this process is more like an unraveling of layers. And it's okay if you feel like you thought you worked through a certain pattern. Like, I don't have that anxiety every time I like go to this certain place. And then you're like, oh, I've like got rid of that. But and then it like comes up again where you're like, no, like, that's okay. Like, also take it at your own pace. Like, if you don't have to make a bunch of changes at once, like, take one thing at a time. And what I believe is, as you're coming to know yourself more authentically, you're okay with those changes.
100%.
And then when you're ready to make the change, you will. Like, there have been some things in my life where I'm like, oh, I know I shouldn't do that, but I still do.
Yeah.
And then I hit like a certain point. I was like, all right, I kind of just like don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And it kind of just happened like naturally.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, I just need to stop.
Yeah.
Like, but when I was focused more on like, who am I authentically? How do I want to show up in the world? Who do I want to be? How do I like get to know myself better? And then like put that out into the world. It's not so much like this like discipline that needs to happen, but more of like the acceptance of your journey along the way. We're never going to be perfect. We're humans. And just that like we're always going to human. Like
And it's so funny because I think so many of our clients come and they're like revved up. They're like, I'm making all the changes and I'm gonna like cut out all the bad people and cut out all the alcohol and cut out all of this and I'm gonna meditate every day. I'm like, nobody does that. Nobody sticks with that. Like nobody goes into the woods and comes back like super evolved and super disciplined. I think you see a lot of products. I was seeing something going around that was like disappear for a month and come back a totally evolved woman, and all it was like a book club of like 16 self-help books, you know. Or you just these different programs that were offered that offer the illusion
called a lobotomy.
Exactly.
There I leave.
It's so nice to hear you talk about that sort of evolving spiral, and then and even back to your point, like if you're healing the wound of worthiness or unworthiness, suddenly you're like, wait, I deserve to move my body in a way that feels good and isn't punishing and also serves me, you know, or I deserve to have relationships that serve me. I've had clients who tried to get away from narcissists for their whole lives and haven't been able to, and then they keep punishing themselves on top of that. Well, I'm the worst. Why do I keep dating narcissists? Or why do I keep dating these terrible people? But they never dealt with the underlying, like, I deserve a person who treats me well. And that would have been the healing, right?
Or taking personal ownership around, like, what are you getting out of these relationships, right? And I mean, it is, like, I will say it's hard work and ignorance is bliss. I definitely, like, think maybe it was a little easier before this dark soul of the night. But you know, it's this internal shift, which I feel like is the most worthwhile thing. And it does take time. I mean, even in my own life, like getting to a point where I had to recognize I couldn't keep doing what I was doing as far as how much I was working, how much I was working on my business, it was a slow process. I had to confront fears about money and not making an impact and what will I do with my time? And am I good enough? And am I doing enough? But it got to a point where, you know, I was able to make those changes. And now I feel great at work. I'm not burnt out. We have time to do this project, like things. And I feel great. And I feel so much better. But it is that slow unraveling. Okay, what's the layer? I'm scared about money. What's the next layer? I feel like I'm not doing enough. What's the next layer? I'm invisible on the earth. Like it's layer over layer. It's not a quick process, but I think it's an important, really meaningful one.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And I have a decade on you. I'm not sure how old you are, and I won't make you tell anybody unless you want to. But I will say that there comes a time when you're like, this is harder to be aware and to be connected and to but I think as you get older and move through your years, you start to be like, I'm so fucking glad that I don't obsess about this or I'm not anxious about that. And I'm not saying I'm not anxious or obsessive. What I'm saying is like there's a lot of stuff I've been able to let go, though not all of it. And it's easier and it leads you to better, healthier people and a better, healthier work-life balance. So I think sometimes too, when you start this work or you first dive in or you're first facing yourself, it can be heavier or feel harder. And then the more experience you have with it and the further down the road you get, for me, I have a lot of gratitude for the younger parts of myself that went in and did hard work and lots of tears and work through stuff and there's still more to do.
So, and so much so much of the process and work too is about like who you're doing it with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
Yes.
in the
Thank
community.
Mhm.
Like
Key
don't
piece.
do it alone.
Yeah.
Don't ever think you can do this
Yes.
alone.
Wait, speak to this, because I actually think that's a really important point.
Yeah. Well, my tendency can be to be like hyper independent. That's how I like got through my childhood and then like my 20s and just like I'm gonna go do all these things by myself and like, which was cool. Like also that I like had this like courage or bravery, or like ignorance even. But then I realized as I was like on this path, I was like, oh, like I can't just do it all on my own. Like I can't just heal on my own. There's like, because we live in a world of relationships. We're humans. Like relationships are so vital and important to our own health and joy and happiness. And so it's so important to find community where you can and like find those people that you trust. And it may take time and it may be a really hard process too to let go of certain people in your life that aren't being those people for you anymore. But it's like, it's really beautiful. It can feel like loneliness at first, but then you can find like you will start to attract the people into your life that you need or who can meet you on that way where you're like are encouraging each other in really positive ways and like people to hold really safe spaces for you to just be fully yourself. Because to like to heal you need that like all parts, like the good, the bad, the ugly. And that's been a key piece for me in the last few years. That has been honestly with like our training and innate path and just group process. And I was just like, whoa, there's like so much that I was missing even in relationship that I'm now, that's like a big thing I'm working on is like more intimacy in relationship with like everyone. And it's been like such a key piece to all of this too.
Yeah. And I mean, I can vouch for that. Like the people do show up. Like your aligned people will come when you like jump off that cliff. And the relationships are even more rewarding than you could ever imagine. So keep going.
Yeah, totally.
And find not only your people, but your practitioners. And do not be afraid to fire practitioners, whether that's any type of healer, a therapist. I mean, interview your therapist. At least from in the mental health world, I believe in interviewing therapists, finding a good fit. I have fired therapists before and hired new ones because, you know.
She's cutthroat.
No, I mean, my own therapist. Well, that's true. It's my healing. Like, I'm cutthroat with my healing. I'm not fucking around.
Well, Betsy, you run some really cool offerings here in Denver. Your somatic plant medicine ceremonies using cannabis. Will you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I started doing this workshop ceremony about a year ago, and it's about first off like a somatic focus. So I'm able to talk for like 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning just about somatic work, give some people some tips and tools on how to actually go into your body, do some somatic processing, and then use cannabis in a very intentional and ceremonial way to be able to feel what it's like to use cannabis in that very intentional way. And so I love like bringing the element of you're going to use cannabis in this intentional way, which I'm sure a lot of people have never done. And you're also going to do it in a group, and it's going to feel more of like a group, a journey, a ceremony, but you're going to have a focus of what to do on your inner process and inner journey. And we use really good music for it. And then we do some actual guiding during the journey too, to just help people stay in their journey. And at the end, people are able to share, and it's been really amazing. Like gotten really good feedback, people just being like, whoa, I never knew I could feel this way on cannabis. I was able to go into some of these emotions that haven't been able to process, or memories that need to process, or just seeing things in a different perspective. It's felt like really impactful for people. So yeah, I love that offering. We've been doing it like every 2 months. So yeah, we do it at a beautiful space called Sakala in Denver. It's this really beautiful healing space.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're hearing a lot about, of course, psilocybin and ketamine when it comes to psychedelic medicine and blending psychedelics with mental health. I feel like maybe we're hearing a little bit less about cannabis, or maybe I am. So tell us a little bit about maybe how the medicines compare, if they do, if they're different experiences, and what might be the unique benefit of cannabis for people in your practice.
Yeah. I know a lot of people can have a complicated relationship with cannabis.
We're in Colorado,
yeah.
so especially here.
Yeah. But I love cannabis because I think the energy and like the support that you get from cannabis is, hey, I'm gonna bring up like exactly what you need to feel. It's very body based, so it's like activates the endocannabinoid system, and the endocannabinoid system actually has the most receptors throughout our body and in our brain, and so it literally lights up like your whole body and the receptors throughout. So that's why you can feel all of a sudden like, oh, I feel really like hot in certain places, or I feel a lot of like tension in my knee. Maybe I was already feeling the tension, but it's going to bring it to light even more. And I think the energy behind cannabis too is these are things that you need to face. Like these are the emotions you need to feel or process. It's been very underneath the surface, but we're going to bring it to the forefront. And I also, with the endocannabinoid system, the main goal of the endocannabinoid system is homeostasis. So coming into balance. So I love how cannabis is like activating the system, and really what it's doing is helping bring up these things to process, to feel, to then come back into balance. And I like to think of her as like a mother energy, where she is really supportive, but she's also going to bring up to you the things that are like here and present that you may need to face or process. But I also feel like she can be really supportive of like, oh, you can feel good in your body, like feeling even that like sense of bliss, or like, because I know a lot of people use it for pain too, to be able to feel that relief.
Seems like it could be a good tool to workshop some of the things we've been talking about around, like, if you have a tricky relationship with it, if you have a tricky relationship with your body, if you have a tricky relationship with control, if you have a tricky relationship with blame, it feels like something like cannabis could help you kind of workshop some of this stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I love using it too in the group work, because you're also going to get support from us as the facilitators, and the group, just the container that like that support offers, instead of doing it at home alone by yourself, say. You're getting that like added support of everything, and just the like being able to stay on task, like stay in intention with what the journey that you're there for.
And it says so much about intentionality, right? Like, okay, the same medicine you can use at home and like watch stand-up comedy and eat ice cream, which is a great experience.
Also sounds great.
Yeah, which it is. But using the same thing for a wildly healing, somatic, body focused experience, like how, I mean, intentionality is such, I think, an important key thing to highlight, is that intentionality can shift so many experiences.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, 100%.
Yeah, it's true for so many, all the substances ultimately, right? That we've been bringing into this healing work. You can have really different kinds of experiences with them depending on your intentionality. Intentionality, dosage, and who you're with, right? Those are kind of the big things, I think.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, Betsy, we like to ask all our guests, what do you think is not working? Why are people not happy? What is the thing in therapy, in culture, in conversation that you see as something that's not working that we're doing?
Yeah. I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I really do believe in this perspective that I think our culture can have, is that you just need to fix yourself. And I don't think that's actually like a helpful perspective to have, because I think it's more about the acceptance. Like, you want change to happen. You're like, I just want to fix it now. I want to stop doing all these things and like be this certain way. But I think what actually works is the acceptance of where you're at, bringing a lot more compassion to yourself, and not this like, and it's also the narrative of the culture of just like the quick fix, or like, take this pill, like just do this one certain thing and it's gonna like fix everything. I think if we start to look at ourselves of like, oh, I need to like fix this thing, and instead we're like looking at ourselves like, oh, like, I'm a human and I have certain things that I don't always appreciate about myself, or I wish were different, but I'm going to bring a lot of love and acceptance to that.
Love that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Me too.
Well, Betsy, it was so great to have you on today. It was just a
Yes.
joy and a great conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. If folks are interested in learning more about what you do, working with you, doing one of your really kick-ass cannabis ceremonies, where can folks find you?
Yeah. I've also like loved being on with you too. Also, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Our pleasure.
So you can find me. I have Instagram, and it's at embodied.guidance. And then I also have a website. It's embodied-guidance. So yeah, those are two like really great places to find me and see what I'm up to.
Great.
Awesome.
And we'll link all that, and your cannabis ceremonies are on the website and Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you so much, Betsy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
Hey everyone, Jane here. Just wanted to give you a quick reminder that Hannah and I are still doing a fundraiser for the Project Hope Hurricane Relief Fund for all of the people that were affected by Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. We're still thinking a lot about those people, their experiences, their losses, and want to do what we can to give our support. So for the entire month of October in 2024, for every single either review or 5-star rating that we get on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we are going to donate $5 on your behalf to the Project Hope Hurricane Relief Fund. We would love your support for this podcast, and we would love to be able to donate for you, on behalf of you, to those people who are in need. So pop over to Spotify, pop over to Apple Podcasts, give us a like, give us a review, make sure you're following us so that you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. You've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A podcast brought to you by Green Roof Studios. This episode was produced, recorded, and edited by Jane Thatcher Hahn and Hannah Buzzo. All original music was written and recorded by the Jane Thatcher Band. For more information about the show, or to get in touch with us, please visit our website at www.arewehappyetpodcast.com. Thanks for joining. See you next time.
Yeah. So don't be with losers is what we're saying.
Only yes, exactly.
Cut that.
I was about to go down like a really like mean girl thing, so I'll just cut that.
Well,